I'm Mark Dawson from the Self-Publishing Show, and this is Self-Publishing Spotlight, where we shine a light on the indie authors who are changing the world of publishing, one book at a time.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Spotlight. We meet indie authors at all stages of their careers and ask them a series of 5 questions. 5 questions about their process, their mistakes and their successes. 5 answers that will help you level up your own author career. My name's Tom Ashford and I'm part of the Self-Publishing Formula. Don't forget that you can get your self-publishing resource kit at selfpublishingformula.com/starter kit. This week's guest is Daniel Parsons. He's written 7 books in the comedy, zombie, fantasy and non-fiction genres, and he lives somewhere in Wales. Hello.
Hello, Tom. Thanks for having me. This is my first ever podcast appearance. Something like it.
It's great to have you on. Stumbled a little bit over that comedy zombie. It's an unusual genre, I guess, apart from Shaun of the Dead. That's what I think of.
Yeah, well, Shaun of the Dead and Zombieland. They tend to be the only ones that people remember. To be honest, I don't know a lot more. It spawned out of an idea I had in university. I was writing a script for one of my modules, and then it sort of developed into a story. And the premise for it is a little bit more original, I think, than most. Basically, there's a student freshers bar crawl, which is a week at the start of a university year in Britain, where all of the students get drunk. And basically, there's a zombie outbreak right at the beginning of freshers, and the students who have just been thrown together in their new accommodation find out that if they get really, really drunk, where they're almost blackout, the zombies don't attack them. So they've got to have this massive bar crawl.
Nice.
Where they've got to get to the end of the city to escape and try not to lose each other and fall asleep and things.
That sounds great.
Before the zombies go, yes. It was fun to write.
Cool. And you also write in non-fiction and fantasy. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. My fantasy was... I've always planned to write fantasy. That was my main genre. It started... I wrote one fantasy novel a long time ago now. And while I was shopping it around traditional publishing agents, I thought I'd do a small novella on the side just for Christmas as a little giveaway, and found that I really enjoyed the self-publishing process. So that was my first ever sort of foray into self-publishing fantasy. But it's a classic sort of Oliver Twist, but with magic and elves and things like that.
Great. And in terms of non-fiction, what sort of thing do you write about?
Well, my first non-fiction book, I've got one out at the moment. It was on how to grow an organic sort of large Twitter presence. That turned out really well. I actually enjoyed writing it a lot better than I expected to. I only wrote it, if I'm completely honest, because I'd grown a massive Twitter following at one point, and it doesn't really pay off as an author sales funnel. So I thought I may as well just put down this information for people that want to learn it anyway, and it turned out really well. That was actually my first Amazon bestseller badge.
Nice.
Was on something that I didn't actually know I was going to publish, and because I enjoyed it, I've decided to publish more non-fiction since.
Cool. Well, great. Okay, let's jump into the 5 questions. The first one, you've covered a little bit already, but it's, why do you write?
Well, I always wrote for passion, essentially. Started as a child, like a lot of people do. Wrote in university, did an English degree. I had very encouraging teachers, and then I got to adulthood and just kept pushing down the traditional route until I found that I quite liked self-publishing. Now, I work in traditional publishing anyway, so I'm a copywriter for a traditional publisher. I'm really attracted to the flexibility of publishing and the lifestyle. Obviously, if I could go on to be a massive bestseller like many of the people we know are, then you get to do lots of glamorous things, traveling all over the world, writing when you want, and I'm not saying that you don't want to work hard, but you just like to work hard on your terms.
Exactly. Yeah. You want to reap the reward for your hard work rather than somebody else.
Absolutely.
Cool. So obviously you're an indie publisher, indie author. Would you switch to being traditionally published if you were given the offer?
It depends on the deal. I've had two small traditional publishing offers in the past where I took them. They were a good learning experience because I got to work with other publishers, but ultimately I asked for my rights back and self-published those books after they'd been traditionally published, just because I had very little control on book covers and marketing. Traditional publishers are very reluctant to give away books for free, and as we know, that can work very well as a marketing tool. So I'd rather have those in my backlist that I can use in a way that is going to benefit me, as opposed to they're going to disappear with a traditional publisher. If I got the right deal with the right publisher and I knew that they could offer something that I couldn't do myself, then yeah, obviously I'd jump at the chance. But it would have to be the right deal.
Yeah, fair enough. So question number 2 is, how do you write? Which is a pretty open question, but part 1 of that would be with words. But part 1 would be plotter or pantser.
I actually used to be a pantser, but I found that I've done a few National Novel Writing Months where I started out pantsing, and then realised that I'd write myself into a corner. Because I write a lot of fantasy, what I tend to find is that my characters become very, very powerful very quickly, and they start having this god complex, and then trying to work out the meaning of life. And when you've backed yourself into a corner where you need to explain the meaning of life to finish the book, that's not a great way to go. So now I tend to plot. I typically do a 3,000 word outline for a full novel, and then that will grow to about 75,000 words by the time I've written the first draft.
Nice. And do you use a Scrivener or a Word or any other sort of writing tool?
Oh, it's just Word. I've considered Scrivener, but I've got so many learning curves I already need to get over. I don't want to add another one.
Fair enough. Do you use any sort of formatting software or anything like that?
Not really. As one of my previous traditional publishing roles, I did formatting exclusively. That was my job for about 3 months at one point, where I just formatted novels all day. So I'm pretty comfortable with doing that in an advanced way through Word. And then I just feed it into, what's the name of the equipment I use? It's a French word. Begins with this. I can't remember.
Is it Calibre or something?
Calibre, that's the one. Yeah, so I tend to create my files on Word and then feed them straight into Calibre, and 90% of the time they're almost readable, and I've got to sort of tidy them up.
Fair enough. And is there a particular time and place that you like to write? Anywhere, like a special writing hole or something?
Yeah, I like writing first thing in the morning. I find if I leave it last thing at night, then I've got no willpower whatsoever and I'm not able to be dedicated. So I typically get up anywhere between 4:30 and 5 at the moment, just because I need to go off for work at 6. So I've got to get that hour and a half in the day. One of the unusual places that I write, and I get most of my writing done this way actually, is on a bus or a train. It's a little bit like a coffee shop because there's a hum of background noise, and you sort of just blur everybody else out, and you get loads of writing done. And there's no Wi-Fi on any of the public transport, so you can't get distracted by the internet.
I used to find going on a train like back home or something, it'd be like an hour and 20 minutes, and it would just be an hour and 20 minutes of complete, and there's nothing else to do and no one to talk to, so you're just like, that all I can do is write, and somehow you then become 3 times more productive than you might otherwise be.
I mean, there's no wonder why Mark Dawson wrote 3,000 words a day when he had a massive train commute in and out of London every day.
Yeah. Cool. Well, question 3 is, are you a full-time author? If you are, how did you get there? And if you aren't, what steps are you taking to make it happen?
I'm not a full-time author at the moment. My income goes up slightly every year. I'm still waiting for the exponential curve where I'm suddenly having 5-figure months. But yeah, I'm definitely putting in processes to get there. I've got a team now, which I didn't have at the beginning when I first started publishing. So like I said, I've worked with traditional publishers as an employee and as an author. So I regularly speak to my cover designer. My editor is actually my previous boss in my office. And yeah, again, my proofreader was a proofreader that sat next to me in the office. So I essentially just stole a traditional publishing team and used them for my own as freelance. So yeah, there's that. There's also the fact that I tend to balance marketing and writing a lot more now. In the past, it's always been, when you're first learning marketing, you tend to throw yourself into marketing because you get excited and forget about the writing.
Right.
And before that, when you're writing, you're just writing. But the balance of doing the two is quite difficult, especially around a full-time job. So what I tend to do now is I write heavily in the morning and then market in the night, and that seems to be shifting a few more copies. Things like, cost per click things, more general marketing that goes on constantly, as opposed to just a short burst every now and again with a newsletter blast or something. I find if you keep them sort of plugging away continuously, then you get better results.
Yeah.
One thing I'm quite excited about is at the moment I've got 6 books, possibly 6 books that are almost finished. There's been a bit of a backlog. There was a bottleneck where I had a few different issues with, my editor had a long backlist of clients he needed to work with and people like that. So eventually when they all come out, they're going to come out quite close together. And I've never had rapid release before, so I'm quite looking forward to seeing how that goes.
Cool. So question number 4 is, what mistakes do you think you've made and what have you got right?
Well, originally I made lots of mistakes. One of the big mistakes I made was that I hired a friend who was doing an English degree to do my editing rather than hiring a professional editor that's relevant to my genre. That was a big mistake. It was well-intentioned, and it seemed like a really good idea at the time, but long term you realise there are a lot of mistakes that even someone who's doing an English degree would miss because they're not an experienced editor. The other one is my covers. I had a little bit of experience using Photoshop and my own design software background sort of stuff. And it turns out I'm not a cover designer. I can design posters, I can design quite basic things if I need to, but I'm not a natural artist. Now, however, I've got a very competent cover designer who is a traditional artist, which is much better for children's books rather than using stock photos and things like that, which really doesn't go with the genre. There was also, and this is one mistake that I made that I think possibly a lot of people make. I started writing when I first left university, commercially. And I assumed that I'd be able to bootstrap my way straight into the industry and it'd all go very easily because you read blogs, you see these huge success stories and you think, it can't be that hard. And then when you try it yourself, you find out that it is essentially, unless you sort of hit the right market or you luck out in some way and you've got this I think people call it lightning in a bottle where you instantly take off. That doesn't tend to happen for lots of people unless they've got a marketing strategy and a marketing budget. So if you leave university, try not to go into the world of work and instead start writing straight away. That doesn't necessarily work because you need to have some sort of ongoing budget to give yourself some momentum, particularly at the beginning. So I think a lot of people possibly drop out of work too early, and that's what I tried to do. But obviously, you go back to work and you find out there are so many more opportunities when you've got money.
Yeah.
And yeah, I tend to be one of these people who genre hops. I haven't completely got this out of my system yet because I still work in 3 different genres and I'm considering more. I might have to get a pen name.
Probably a good idea, yeah.
Yeah, they're all very, very different genres as well, as you know, so it's not the biggest mix. So that sort of stunts momentum quite a lot, which I've learned over the time. So yeah, and obviously it slows down your release rate per audience. So if you're bringing out a book every 3 months, that's not too bad if it's for one audience. But if you're bringing out a book for one audience in 3 months and then it doesn't come around for another 9 months when you release a new fantasy or horror book, then that's the same as releasing slow.
Yeah.
So lots and lots of mistakes. But they're all learning experiences.
Cool. Well, that leads straight into question 5, which is what's your final piece of advice for authors starting out in indie publishing, other than, I guess, not releasing in 5 different genres One book a year.
Yeah. Well, lots of advice. I spent 4.5 years trying to write my first novel. I wrote it. I really enjoyed the process and I learned a lot, but I really could have done it much, much more quickly. I think some of the big, very prolific authors talk about this quite a lot. It's a Silicon Valley term. It's the fail fast idea. So if you know you've got to get books out, then get them out as quickly as possible, because you think that you might write at a higher quality if you write slowly. And the reality is, if you just concentrate those hours, you can actually get a lot more done and learn a lot faster in that process. Anything that doesn't work, you can get over that hurdle very quickly and move on to something more productive and something that's a bit more marketable. Obviously, they stay in one genre, that helps a lot as well.
Yeah.
And one thing that I didn't start out with at all was any sort of sales funnel. So if you've got all your ducks in a row, you've got the calls to action in the back of your ebooks, you've got a mailing list set up and people can sign up to it easily, you've got the onboarding sequence. All of these things combined create this momentum for you that will slowly build your career, or in some cases very quickly build your career. But if it's all automated, then you don't have to think about it too much. It takes a lot of the work out of it. Whereas what I did when I first started was you end up trying to claw contacts and information and things together manually, and automation sort of really helps fast track that without too much extra effort. You've just got to front load some of the work.
Cool. Great. Well, that's 5 questions, so you're off the hook. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it, and I'll probably be on a lot more podcasts now because of this.
Good. That's it for this week's Self-Publishing Spotlight. Don't forget that you can get your free self-publishing resource kit at selfpublishingformula.com/starter kit. And if you want to appear as a guest on this show, send us brief details about yourself and your writing to support@selfpublishingformula.com using the subject line Self-Publishing Spotlight. I'm Tom Ashford, and I'll see you again next week.